For well over 100 years, the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department has responded to emergency calls that have not only encompassed routine scenarios such as house fires or motor vehicle extrication assignments, but also more unique, unusual, and memorable incidents, including the Great Fire of 1901 or, in more recent memory, the 1993 Stewart Tank Farm 4th Alarm Fire. In each and every instance, the professional emergency responders of this department demonstrated their exceptional level of skill as well as their dedication and selfless service to the community. This same level of commitment was called upon once again during a truly remarkable and tumultuous time frame in 2007 as the men and women of the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department were thrust into a global spotlight during a month that will forever be known as a December to remember.
Hey, we just had a building collapse at the 300 block of East Bay Street across from the PMB.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it could be the building that's under construction.
300
block of East Bay Street. It's right across the street from the PMB, from the police memorial building. It shook our entire building. They say there could be people trapped, and we don't know how many.
All I know is part of the building has collapsed and there's several workers trapped inside.
The call came in the early morning hours, approximately 6 o'clock. I was asleep when the call came in, so I stumbled out of bed, put my clothes on, and proceeded to get into the in Fire 1 and drive to the scene.
And as I was coming off of the I-95 North and Monroe Street exit, it's when the dispatch went out of a building collapse at Berkman Plaza. And then immediately my pager went off, alerting me of this incident that had taken place.
It was about 6 in the morning. I had heard something tragic happened on Bay Street on the radio. And about that time, Fire 4 called me and asked me if I was en route to the station.
And I had gotten a call on my cell phone. My brother, he called me and wanted to know if I knew what was going on. I said no, because there's been a building collapse. So I started calling other people on the USAR team, some of the leaders and trainers, and asking if they were aware, and they were. They told me where I was at, so I never made it to the fire station. I went straight to the scene in my private vehicle.
When I pulled up, I did see the collapse. I saw the garage on the ground.
First arrived at the scene and looked up and saw where a 6-story parking garage once stood, and everything is just collapsed on top of each other. 3/4 of the parking garage is down 15 foot high, which stood 55 foot high before, 60 foot high. Is pretty mind-boggling.
It was truly amazing when I first arrived on the scene to see the concrete structures, collapse from the top all the way down, and the mushrooming of smoke that was there, and to then see people exiting, the ones that rode the tide down, exiting from the collapsed area.
It was very chaotic. There were workers dragging other workers out. As soon as Fire 4 got there, I immediately assigned him the inner area where the collapse was at, and I kept everybody outside the gate. About 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it seemed fairly quickly into the incident. I looked around and Charles Moreland, Chief Moreland, walked up to me. And I immediately told him, I need somebody to take over the medical sector because it was quickly, this thing was growing very rapidly. So as in all scenes that are chaotic, you've got to start breaking them down. It's kind of like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So as soon as Chief Moreland got there, I turned over the EMS sector to him, told him where I'd put the patient so far, and he said he'll take care of the whole thing.
The immediate goal was to assess the injuries, to determine who needed to be transported initially, who needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. Fortunately, on this scene, there were very few people that had significant injuries. So before you make a poor decision and move people into rescue units that really didn't probably need to be there, it was important to do some sort of assessment to see what we have and make sure the people that needed to go first get off the scene first. Certainly the size up was very important to determine immediately the people that are capable of walking and moving, and they were fine to put them in an area isolated from the people that were red and yellow. Put the greens off to the side, work on the red and yellows, the stuff that we come to know to do on a regular basis from our day-to-day operations. That was done. JTA buses were called for. I asked for additional ambulances from our private ambulance partners within the city government, and we were able to get the private services help. And the incident seemed to move pretty quick after that.
I looked around, and next thing I know, I went to Chief Morley. He said, all patients have been transported. Do you have any more? I called Fire 4. He said, we don't have anybody else right now on the pile that we can rescue. We're still looking, but there's nobody left.
After we got all the patients off the scene, and that includes the greens, the ambulatory patients were being transported by JTA to the hospital. After everybody left the scene, the goal then shifted to making sure that we can account for every patient that was transported.
As the scene started to be more organized and everything started calming down, we went to more into a search mode, and that's when Fire 4 determined if the scene was safe, and we kind of pulled back a little bit, took everything in and reorganized and went back in with the search plan because it was determined that there was one person that was still missing.
So our whole goal was to find this one individual with the expectations he was alive and trapped in a void, and then we focused all our attention there.
At the first part of the incident, there was a very good chance that person was still alive. And we went at the search effort with that type of mentality, that we have a viable victim that is trapped.
Our first thing was to talk to witnesses that were there with the victim and try to find out a location where he was last seen.
And my main concern, as was Fire 4's, was to make sure that the pile was safe for us to do searches. So we wanted to get a building engineer there to survey the site, identify all the danger areas, and we would start searching in the areas that were less dangerous.
We did have one dog on scene very early, Captain Hall's dog, and we've got our search cams in act to search areas that aren't safe, do a quick search. We had to climb 15, 20 foot down into the pile with your twisted rebar with tons of concrete hanging on the end of it, climb between the rebar.
We were fortunate we had some crane operators there that were very beneficial. We moved thousands of pounds or many tons of debris that was in the pile, trying to get ourselves down to voids where we could try to find this gentleman.
All of our search had to be right in front of an 80-ton slab and a 60-ton slab hanging on bent post-tension rebar. It was just devastating to think if that gave way while we were doing our search.
It began to look like that this could be an extended operation. Let's start ramping up for an extended period of time that we're going to be here. And let's bring all the things we need in to support this operation: the chuck wagon, the portalettes, the tents, everything that goes along with an extended operation, say that's going to last 3 or 4 days.
We are trained to rescue. It's hard to convert from rescue to recovery. Risk versus gain is always in our mind.
And as time went by, we began to assume logically that this was probably going to be a body recovery. And then we went into a body recovery mode and took even less risk with our people.
The lengthy body recovery period was fraught with many challenges and dangers. Safety officers on the pile of concrete debris had to use a keen eye to recognize the first symptoms of fatigue as firefighters continuously pushed their bodies to the brink of exhaustion. The physical demands, however, proved to be only one of many significant concerns for the assembled firefighters involved with the body recovery.
We had so many different mixtures of things that we had to cut and breach through. It took a multitude of tools to go through one hole, both wood, steel, concrete, and it was very difficult in that respect. And the post-tension cables are an extremely hard thing to cut. A lot of them still have severe tension on them, which is a very dangerous hazard as far as a whiplash type effect, almost like a bullwhip. They had actually ripped through set-up concrete, which was quite impressive to me. Its the tension and the type of collapse that ended up ultimately happening from the post-engine cable failure or whatever the case may have been that caused it.
After more than 40 hours following the initial 911 call, in the pre-dawn darkness of Saturday morning, December 8, the floodlights and other illumination instruments were finally able to reveal the location of the tragic remains of the deceased worker. Now, careful and deliberate excavation work was required in order to free the body from the hold of the rubble, with firefighter safety still remaining a top priority. By mid-afternoon of that same day, both the recovery objective as well as the firefighter safety agenda had been fully accomplished.
That is an accomplished job, that we did successfully remove the remains. But of course, there is a letdown there. We would much rather have brought him home to his family. It just didn't work out. So we had to shift from that to at least getting him back home. And it was an array of emotions. I think it was a feeling of accomplishment, doing the best with what we had to do. It's just a recovery and not a rescue.
We were glad that we did find him, and we were able to use great care in removing the body and treat his body with the most respect. It was like the best of a bad situation, that we were able to give him the most respect that we could, and for the benefit of his family. We were satisfied with the way it turned out. I mean, unfortunately, he did die.
From my perspective, I was disappointed, to be honest with you. Wasn't disappointed in anything that we had done, because I know what our firefighters did. But I was a little disappointed that the outcome for the individual wasn't better wasn't the best outcome.
It was a success, especially from our fire department and the USAR team, and the fact that we worked so well together. The team effort, many thousands of hours of training that we've done for the USAR training paid off.
It just seemed like logistically to our rescue, everything was like clockwork.
Firefighters, our guys, were amazing. They did an outstanding job. They should be commended for their hard work and dedication.
We keep handling these incidents very successfully. And it's a testament to the men and women on this job. And I'm proud of each and every one of them.
With this historic response to a major structural collapse still fresh on everyone's mind, the department soon found itself involved in yet another incident of epic proportion. On Wednesday, the 19th of December, merely 10 days after the recovery of the victim amidst the concrete remains of the Berkman parking garage, the north side of Jacksonville was rocked by an explosion unlike any ever witnessed in the city before.
Rescue, what's the location of your emergency?
I'm out in my boat with my son, and there's been a really good sized explosion. It is a good sized mushroom cloud.
Is it possibly a transformer or anything, or can you tell?
Oh, no. This is way bigger than a transformer. It shot something, I'm talking thousands of feet in the air.
I was actually sitting at my house off duty. Sitting on my couch, I remember clearly sitting and watching TV, and there was an explosion, almost like a transformer exploded, except it sounded like it was sitting at my front door when it exploded.
And I was listening to the station radio when I heard the first transmission from Rescue 83, I believe, advising that they heard a loud explosion, they see a mushroom cloud. So obviously that got my attention, because I knew the other hazmat team 7 was actually at Baptist doing an ice cream party for the kids there.
I called fire communications and reached one of the FireCom personnel, and she was pretty frantic and sounded like they were receiving a lot of information. I inquired about this explosion, and she asked, "Well, do you want to go?" I said, "Absolutely, I want to go." And a millisecond later, she says, "Oh, you got to go. You got to go. They're requesting you."
And not only was it coming up as huge dark smoke at the base of it, but you saw a lot of fire in the base of that smoke, and you saw it pushing that big mushroom cloud steadily and steadily upward. It was already many hundreds of feet up in the air at that time, so there was no doubt that this was a tremendous explosion.
Obviously, the radio communication, information we're receiving from FireCom, visualizing the smoke column, we knew that we were dealing with something of significance.
I went down New Berlin Road and turned on Fay Road. I was absolutely shocked. It looked like a war zone. There were people staggering in the street, covered in dust and blood. There was workers from JEA. They're already starting to pull the victims out of the area.
We were the first hazmat engine on the scene. Hazmat 7 was directly behind us. 21 was still coming. We parked up by engine 30, who was near the gates of the facility, had large volume of fire. And from the looks of it, it looked like a petroleum fire. It looked like a bulk storage tank or several bulk storage tanks. Could see some large shooting flames, I guess. And so we had pressure fire in the rear, had what looked to be like the boiling liquid fire. And it looked like several of the containers that when we first arrived, you could see an MC307 sitting in front. You could see an intermodal sitting up front. You see some other type of outline of a container. We really couldn't tell exactly what it was at first, but these 3 container trucks were sitting there, cargo tanks, and they were impinged, and there was fire relieving from the fill ports in the back, from the top fill ports, manway covers.
I was absolutely floored by the blast damage. Buildings, warehouses, the walls were just caved in. The windows were blown out. Cars, the sheet metal on the cars were wrinkled as if somebody had just crushed them. And the magnitude of such was just staggering. When I spoke to the engineer on Engine 30 who was riding up, he expressed his concerns, and I was able to get a second portable radio from him at that time. He went ahead and started searching buildings and setting up. I took the second portable radio and established incident command.
Well, Chief Centerfit was there, and he was the one that was, I guess, command for the time, and he told us that we had people down and we had to go search for them. So we went in the direction that he told us they might be, and they weren't there, and we came back, and then we had another search party formed, and we went for another direction to look in that area.
There were still victims stumbling around within the property of the T2 chemical company, some bleeding from the face and ears, covered in dust, and the best way I can describe it, they were completely in shock. So we got those people, we started pushing them out the gate. Hey, go down to the end of the road there, you know, there's help for you down there.
So I think our total injuries that we transport, I think, were 14. And it was just a matter of just making sure we organized. We had plenty of residual capacity and having available units in staging. Everything pretty much went, as far as I could tell, pretty much textbook.
We had pulled everybody out. We are watching these explosions. We're trying to get our people together, our equipment together, the amount of foam that we needed together. And I received notification from Fire Communications that they were on the phone with victims, and that they had some victims trapped in a trailer that could not get out.
He's saying the fence on Fay Road side. He's behind the office building on fire.
Oh, hold on there. So the fence on Fay Road side, he's on the office building that's
behind it.
Okay, fence on Fay Road side. He is behind
an office building, and then there's a mobile trailer, mobile trailer behind that, mobile home trailer.
Yeah, absolutely. Just come get me. I'm in severe pain.
I understand, sir. I'm going to mobile home trailer. We getting them to you, okay?
At that point in time, we started sending a lot of our resources out into the surrounding areas to find these victims. Knowing that we had viable victims, knowing they were still alive, we made the decision to send people back into the T2 property. I walked up to Lieutenant Crowley on Engine 30, and I said, Lieutenant, I need you to take your crew and go back inside the T2 fire, you know, to search for victims. And he looked at me and he looked at his crew and he said, well, Chief, if there's victims in there, then we'll go back in there.
Or I didn't know how many victims we might have, or people that we might have, so we just went and looked until we found the individual and then got him out. He had covered himself up with some debris to keep the heat off of him, so we just took that off and talked to him, made sure he was breathing okay, and he ended up having respiration problems, and he was complaining of his legs, so we just packaged him up and got him out as quick as we could.
The victim that we pulled out of there, Tim Phillips, was found by Engine 30 and Lieutenant Crowley's crew. Where they found him at was right in the middle of some of the worst fire that was out there.
We knew what we had. We had a large flammable liquid fire. We had chemical tankers that were involved and atmospheric storage tanks, but it was all stuff that could be put out with foam.
The hazmat team, through countless years of training, they looked at this fire and realized that this is what they've been training for. When the hazmat team, Wilson and Smith, came up and they had that confidence that it just exuded, it was obvious, hey, that we can do this. And so they in turn put together a plan. They worked with Chief Holzenbeck and they went in and put the fire out.
The fire went out rather quickly after our attack, so our tactics were correct.
We knew it had to be done, and this is a testament to the members of our hazmat team. These guys don't have to be told what to do.
You know, the hazardous materials team deserves just a tremendous amount of praise for what they did that day. But it was the other firefighters from combat and from the rescue division, from prevention, that were carrying the foam, that were searching for the victims, that were stretching the hose lines. An incident of this magnitude takes complete teamwork. There's so many tasks that have to be performed. It takes everybody doing a part, doing their piece. Everybody loads the wagon, and then everybody pushes and pulls. And before you know it, we've handled this issue. And that's actually what occurred here at the T2 fire. And after 20 years on the job, I can say without a doubt it's the proudest I've ever been to be, working for Jacksonville Fire Rescue. It was that teamwork and that commitment to professionalism that impressed me so much.
Veteran firefighters and public safety professionals have an age-old adage, some might even say superstition, that implies things come in threes. That belief would soon become a prophecy for the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department, as only 4 days later, one day before Christmas Eve, the city would witness yet another event that would once again call upon every ounce of exceptional talent and courage possessed by the finest first responders in the nation.
Fire Rescue ask you what is the address of your emergency?
Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church. I mean, it's just roaring at the peak of the roof. It's on fire. The church is on fire.
Is that the Hendricks Baptist Church?
Right.
And the fire's through the roof?
Yeah.
Very foggy morning. Kind of slowed our response a little bit, I guess. Didn't know what we were going to have when we got there. When we got on scene, there were flames coming through the roof about 15, 20 feet above the roof line.
To get dispatched, usually to structure fires in the middle of the night, tells you it's something significant. During the day, maybe not so much, but in the middle of the night, generally you know it's going to be a working fire, especially at a church where nobody's at. We were on scene first with Engine 13, and we had heavy fire venting through the north side of the sanctuary.
When Captain Thomas advised, he had fire through the roof immediately. As through the years, as you read and study, you always know that churches have a very high incidence of collapse.
Upon arrival, the fire was through the roof. It was the building was fully involved when I got there. So command was already on scene set up, so I was immediately assigned the north sector, which is the rear of the building.
My firefighters and myself met Engine 13 at the front door with a 2.5-inch line to assist them in forcible entry. We were going to try to make a quick interior attack. That was the direction Engine 13 wanted to go in. The minute we opened that door, the howling sound that it made from the updraft was unlike anything I've heard in 15 years. Unbelievable.
Had to force entry in through the front doors, and once we opened the doors, the air just started sucking in, so we knew that probably more fire than we could handle with an interior attack.
When I pulled up there, immediately called a second alarm. Then as I advised everyone, this is going to be strictly defensive, nobody to enter the structure. Through the fog and smoke, I could see that there was an adjoining building. So I was obviously worried about an exposure and extension. So immediately, Fire 1 Chief Perdue and Fire 3 Chief General positioned them on the north and south side of the building and advised them we need to make sure that, obviously, that it doesn't extend into the exposure.
We were attempting to keep the fire from spreading. The building was lost. So we wanted to make sure that any adjacent buildings, any exposures were protected. So that was the main objective as far as I was concerned.
Knowing that you don't have to tell everybody what you need to do. A lot of these experienced guys come up and say, obviously we know what we're going to do. And at that point as instrument commander, it becomes very easy. Now what I'm doing is just supplying them resources that they need.
The fire was pretty much contained within the walls. The walls were intact, although the roof had. So I wasn't too worried about the fire spreading, so long as the doors held. And we had lines positioned. We actually had a crew inside the exposed building with a 2.5-inch line. So we were prepared in case the fire broke through to cut it off at that point.
Some people look at it and go, well, you lost the whole sanctuary. It was a foregone conclusion when we pulled up that we were going to lose that due to the danger of the collapse. But again, due to that aggressive firefighting, a good experience, and good tactical knowledge, by stopping it from extending into the other parts of the building, I think we saved a lot of the church and allowed them to continue to operate out of there.
So I contribute saving those classrooms as the success. I think the sanctuary was gone. Again, the fact that nobody got hurt and that we saved the classrooms, that was a true success to it. It was basically just a large building fire that everybody's been to with frequency through their career. We call it a surround and drown. The ladder pipes went up quickly, started getting water on it. And a lot of times you read tactics books and they're written from firemen from other cities and their experiences. And unfortunately, the buildings in their cities may be different age, different construction than what we find here in our city. But this validated that. Everything you read on these large sanctuary church fires, they tell you what's going to happen, and it happened at this fire.
In retrospect, hindsight, you can always see things that you could have done better. There was no particular thing that stood out in this particular fire, but it's all a learning experience.
I was able to tell the preacher, the pastor of the church, I said, a church is not made up of brick and mortar and wood. It's actually of the people. So, that in itself eased my mind a little bit, knowing that this thing will rebuild, but the church will continue.
Among the more routine daily emergency calls involving cardiac patients, house fires, or extrication assignments, the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department successfully mastered a unique parking garage collapse and chemical lab explosion, along with a large structure fire, all in the span of a little more than 2 weeks. Those days in 2007 illustrate the dynamic environment that truly exists within emergency response, a profession routinely subjected to the unexpected, yet commanding a reliable, dedicated, and exceptionally skilled workforce. This was a time to remember, with testimony willingly provided by our professional first responders of Jacksonville, and, in the process, creating a history-making December to remember.
Bad things happen in threes, I guess. And in this case, you're just primed and you're ready because these incidents have been happening. So you're just ready. Once you get on scene, you do your job.
Everybody still talks about that month that those 3 calls came in within a relative short period of time. And, those are calls you're just never going to forget.
It's just par for the course. It's what we do every day. Some things are bigger than others, but everything is based on the building blocks that we do, again, on a day-to-day basis. And all we do is just build on them, make them a little bit bigger, get a little bit more people there. But this department does a fantastic job, and it was evident in the December to remember.
They just pour their heart and soul into it, and I'll never forget that, the devotion that people had to doing the job.
I think what I take away from it all is that we have very good firefighters on this job. They're trained well, they work hard, they move the obstacles out of their way to get it done. And I'm very proud to be associated with the department because I know this city is well protected. And I hope that the things that took place in December, as the citizens look back on it, they realize they are well protected.